Welcome to the Shattering Inequities podcast, where we uncover the bold, research-driven strategies that are transforming education for every student, especially those historically left behind. In each episode, we'll highlight leaders who are not just imagining a better future, but actively creating one. Through real-world successes, challenges, and actionable insights, this podcast is a space to crowdsource solutions that advance shattering inequities in education. And now, here's your host, Dr. Robin Avelar-La Salle. Welcome, everybody. My name is Robin Avelar-La Salle, and this is the Shattering Inequities podcast. And today I am thrilled to bring to you a very, very special guest who I've known now for longer than I care to admit, although he's still a very young man. This person's reputation precedes him far and wide as a champion for all students, and we couldn't be more excited to have you here with us today. Dr. Paul Gothold, welcome.
Thank you. Honor and privilege to be here.
You're so awesome. Well, Paul, your bio is too long to share with everybody on this podcast today. But suffice it to say, you, like me, have done all the jobs, from teacher to site leader to district leader to county office superintendent, and now leading efforts to equip school executive teams, superintendents, boards, and labor partner leaders to work together on behalf of all students. You may know that this podcast has one belief, and that is that every student is entitled to a premium education, no matter where they live, where they go to school, or what their circumstances. And I know that speaks to your heart. So welcome. What I'd like to do is to remind our audience and to review for you that our podcast is a little bit of a unique platform. Of course, we want to inspire by sharing bright spots and success stories of leaders in all aspects of education who have had wonderful results, defying the idea that demographics must determine destiny, and you're among that cherished group. We also want to inform, but actually the primary purpose of this podcast, and this speaks to my passion and yours, is research. So years ago, I saw a documentary where it was about a woman who had this very rare condition, and she had gone to all the medical professionals in her community, and they just could not figure it out. It was a head scratcher. And someone got the idea to put her case online and to ask people, patients and family members and professionals around the world to share their experience and to weigh in and to crowdsource intelligence. And that sort of always stuck in my mind. And so that's what this is. This is a platform to crowdsource intelligence, because as smart as I am, and you're twice that at least, and as smart as every individual is who has figured some things out, none of us is as smart as all of us collectively. But we really don't have one place to bring all that wisdom together and to make sense of it. And so that's what this webcast is about. So thank you, Paul, for agreeing to participate in this research project. After a set of them, we will stop and take stock and do a vista point and analyze them, and then do white papers and publish and so forth. So you'll be part of that sharing of research protocol, as will the audience, who through their contributions before, during, and after each of these presentations will contribute to the database upon which we will identify what is the solution for overcoming that dastardly inevitability assumption that says that some students, by virtue of what group they belong to, are more capable or inherently more able to achieve in school than others. And we just know that that is not the case. So with that, Paul, what I'd like to do is to ask you this. you are among our trusted leaders in education in this state, in California, and across the country. Can you give us a little insight into what about your life has brought you to this place where where you serve in the way that you do?
That is a loaded question. What about in my life? Well, I never saw myself, first of all, as a teacher. I never aspired to be in education. In fact, coming from a family of educators, I was running the opposite direction. Um, and I had the blessing of growing up with a mom who cared so deeply about education, who cared so deeply about serving others, that I had one of the most remarkable role models that I still aspire to this day. And that she just constantly has put others before herself in every aspect of her life as I know her. Um, to the point where it probably is a little bit harmful for her that she hasn't done enough of taking care of herself. So having that as a role model and as a frame growing up, but she raised 4 kids by herself. She was a traveling music teacher, and when the first Prop 13 hit, that was it. The music was the first thing to be cut back in the 70s. And so we found ourselves being kind of part of the middle class America to automatically overnight. She was scraping by as a musician, as an organist in the church, had to pick up some custodial duties to raise 4 kids. And that stuck with me. That's why I'm always thinking when districts are in the process of layoffs, like how the family's attached to that. I lived through it. And it wasn't until after I got through college, I was actually a business major and doing some work in the finance industry, when I was asked to be a coach at a college, that I said yes without hesitation, um, and left a really good paying job to essentially not make anything. And um, so the universe had a plan for me that I wasn't aware of. And the only thing that I could do intermittently to the day that would allow me to coach was substitute teaching. And so I fell into it indirectly. And my first teaching job was with LA County Office of Education, working with probation expelled children. And I got a first-hand glimpse of how badly our system had left so many kids out who were filled with promise, filled with love, filled with so many great things that were covered up by this exterior of, people, places, and things not taking care of them the way that they needed to be taken care of as humans. And I fell in love with it. I mean, we did miraculous things with our kids, not just made it through high school and off probation and out of the juvenile hall, but into college and through college, and through those experiences. Um, I learned more from my kids than I think they ever learned more from me, just about the value of not just public education, but what it could do to set yourself up for a really good life if you took full advantage of it. And if we as a system shifted our thinking and mindsets and truly believed in every single child, that great things could happen. And not knowing any better, I treated our kids like my mom treated me. I mean, you're going to college. What? You had to break through a lot of stereotypes. You had to break through a lot of information that they were given, and biases that they've encountered. But if that's the ticket to a good life, why wouldn't we expect that for every child? Why does it have to be some and not others? I never understood that. So when I started working for the comprehensive schools, it was saddening to see how we packaged kids up and sorted them based on adults' perceptions of what they could and could not do. And I've been fighting against that tension now for 30 years. Just ensuring that, if I'm going to be in a space where kids are going to come into my school system they're gonna have choices when they leave if it's up to me. And taking apart those systems that aren't good for every child is it's a moral conviction. It's not that's I saw myself getting treated differently when I was growing up because of the way I looked, and I didn't want that for all kids. It's there's a fairness issue. There's a moral conviction attached to it, but there's also a solution. There's a way to change it, and so I've never given up on that. And whatever I can do to contribute, even now in this next iteration of making sure our kids not just get what they need and deserve, but also to see themselves in the present moment and see themselves in the future that they want, and make that attachment to it. School shouldn't be, something you have to do. It should be something you want to do because it can. This is how you build the blocks for your future. And so, um, I don't blame our current situation on any one particular group. It's the way the system was designed, and unless you can see all those components that are not kind to all of our kids, why would you do anything at all, right? So we just need to collectively say, enough's enough. Our kids deserve better, and change these things that have not been kind to our kids. And I still reserve a ton of hope that we can do that.
Paul, um, your heart just shines through every time. It's infectious. Um, Before we leave your early career, your entree into education, which by the way for me is blasphemy because I knew I wanted to be a teacher when I was 3 years old. And the idea that some of my heroes, including you, didn't aspire to go into education from birth is just mind blowing to me. Um, and that you're here and you're doing all the things that you're doing. You told a story once, and to me, I think this was your first very profound not on my watch, not on my watch situation. And that was when you were in probation, teaching kids who were adjudicated, and uh, you were assigned as a math teacher. And the math that you were assigned to teach high schoolers was something that you had a little bit of an objection to. Can you share that not on my watch with us and how you framed it in your mind and what you did about it in action and what the result was, please?
Yeah, I looking back, I guess I've been interrogating the system since I started, and I had no research behind what I'm going to tell you. It was this was this was instincts, and this was just, you get in these places where what is the right thing to do, and I've always trusted my gut. And so I I happened to be teaching algebra, and back then, a long time ago, 32 years ago or so, the course of study for ninth graders was algebra, and so I taught algebra. And I had an assistant principal walk in the room and say, "Wait, what's going on here?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "You're teaching algebra." And I said, "Yeah." He said that they're ninth graders. He said, "Well, they're functioning at like the third and fourth grade level. I have all their assessments." And just without hesitation, I said, "They've been doing that for 8 years. I got rid of those worksheets. I'm teaching them on grade level because this is what they need if they choose to go to college." I said, "Look, they have holes in their learning, but please go talk to them because they're getting this and they're excited about it." And I just welcome the opportunity, not to be this rebellious new teacher, but to just say, you know what, they can get this. They are getting it. I'm teaching it. They're learning it. And where there's holes, we're patching that up. And at the end of the day, I was allowed to continue to do what was right for the kids, and not knowing it at the time, but actually probably influencing the thinking of some of the folks that were actually designing for our kids and contributing to that perpetuation of the status quo.
So that sort of leads right into the situation where I met you. So it so happened that maybe almost 15 years ago now, there was a district, Linwood Unified, which is right next to Compton. I only say that because songs have been written about Compton. So people might know about that community, but Linwood's right next door. And they were in some dire straits and difficult circumstances, and you were brought in as chief academic officer and then eventually superintendent to assess the situation and to do something about it. And so I'm just going to give you open mic time. Can you tell us what you found there? And what I'm hearing in your early algebra story was the idea that remediation for you was not acceptable. And what you expected was for students to accelerate their growth academically if under the right conditions. And that's sort of what I came to know you by in Linwood. So if you wouldn't mind telling the story and make sure somewhere in there you share the results for students, please.
Yeah, and feel free to remind me if I don't. You know, I, I was, I was also when I was asked to come over to Linwood, I looked up the data. I looked up, what was going on there, and I got sad because I know that that data is not a reflection of what our kids are capable of. And I even had a number of folks say, "Why are you going over there? The place is a mess." They gave me all the reasons why I shouldn't go, and I said because that's a community with people and kids, and I think I can help. That was it. There's the ability to help more kids, and so um, at the time, Linwood was in dire straits financially. They had been under multiple investigations, both at the federal level and the state level. Um, Almost financially bankrupt, and had some of the lowest performing schools in the state of California. The list went on. It was broken. They had just come off of massive layoffs. There were so many things that had converged. Some federal indictments. I could go on and on. And so,
Paul, one way to remember that is it was right before school was going to open, and half of the principalships were unfilled. So just to characterize that, would you share the demographics of the school and community right as you launch into what you found?
100% free and reduced lunch, 90% Latino, 10% African American. There's a couple variations of that in there, but that's broadly um, was the profile. And there was just this incredible lack of motivation, desire for anyone to come to work. I mean, the culture was so defeated, and um, they had a mass exodus of kids. There was hundreds of kids that left to go to neighboring districts, um, and so we took some time to get a core group of folks together, some administrators and some of the union leaders, the mayor. We just got some folks together and said, what do we want for this community and our schools? And spent 3 days, solid group of 50 kids, parents, school officials, just talking through what we want for every student that comes through our doors. And that kind of became the anchor for the next 4 or 5 years of what we were going to do, because its current reality was unacceptable. There was just, and by the way, what came out of that, in short, was a demand from parents and everybody. We want our kids to be able to go to college.
Which is so interesting because whenever we do surveys, when we do studies in schools and districts, overwhelmingly, um, adults in school systems, mostly with a very kind heart, suggest that they want to prepare students to enter the world of work or to go to a community college, somewhere where they will be successful. The four-year university option is really not what they believe their students want or what the families want. Is that what you found?
No, but it's irresponsible for me to speak for on behalf of a community that I did not live in. First of all, that's part of the problem. I'm not coming into a community where I haven't lived as a parental figure, as the expert, as anything other than getting in relationship and learning from the community about their aspirations, hopes, and desires, because I can co-construct something from that. I can build with them and be in relationship with them. If I'm coming in telling them what's going to be happening to their kids, I'm not sure that's good for anybody. But at the end of the day, I've never been in a room with parents who didn't want that for their kids. And you still hear that quite often. Um, and from our perspective, in designing this, what you can't tell me the current reality was good, because we had a graduation rate of 58%, and for Black children it was 41%, and that was based on a mindset that not all kids are going to go to college. So you tell me how that's working. You tell me how we've just seen the largest investment per dollar per kid in the last 5 years as a state go through the rough monetarily, and the results academically on a steady decline. There's been an inverse relationship. The state has committed all these dollars, and yet, because I believe we just took the eye off the ball. Instruction and what we were supposed to be doing in terms of preparing kids for the next level has gone by the wayside in some ways. There's all of these distractors. At its very core, even if a kid doesn't want to go to college, are we hurting them by putting them in classes that are going to give them better computation and literacy and thinking? And I've never understood that. I've always been completely baffled at this notion that we put these graphs up and compare kids' achievement level by race, yet they don't have access to the same learning opportunities. Why would you expect that to be this? I don't get it. There's so many layers of inherent bias and problems when we say that not all kids are going to go to school or go to college. Should we be making that decision for them? Why shouldn't we provide a system that prepares every child for college? And if they choose not to go, it's their choice, but not the system. Because I guarantee you, what's going to happen is, if you at least have a rigorous curricular program for every student, your academic achievement is going to go up. When we continue to treat kids in a manner that's separate from what the data would, and our desired state of what we want for our children, why would you be surprised that it continues to look the way that it does? Uh, there was such gross tracking in Linwood that perpetuated this idea of have and have nots. They had these little centralized bubbles of kids that were just kind of peeled off, and we're gonna make you college bound. And then everybody else, I mean, I think there were, just as an example, 6 classes just for English freshmen. There was ninth grade English regular. So if you're a regular kid, ninth grade honors, ninth grade sped, ninth grade I mean, seriously, grouped and sorted in 5 or 6 different courses for English, ninth grade English. We tore that apart and just said, no, everyone's getting pre-AP English. I mean, that's the course of study. The expectations should not be wildly different for a child at a certain grade level and content area, not just in the same school, but think about all the different schools we have. If we don't have a baseline expectation for our kids and what those outcomes look like, why are we shocked at the results? So this became kind of the rallying cry, and the great thing about it is that even when there was so much, there was pushback because kids aren't academically ready. I don't want my kids with those kids. Well, you name it, we heard it, and we also preempted the board that they would hear this. And I said, but you've got to trust us. You've got to be. I'm just going to ask that you're open and willing for us to show you a different way. Because I think more kids will be successful in your class, and I do believe that's what you want. But if we follow the research, we can't continue to keep tracking and treating kids differently based on these bogus markers. And if I could boil it down to one thing, expectations for kids, that's it. If I expect a kid to do great things, guess what? They meet it. And I think one of the things that gave me the ability to stand in that space and deal with the pushback, and it came from everywhere. But I lived it. I lived it as a teacher. I lived it where this is what it's going to take. Then I'm going to support you and love you, and we're going to get there together. Um, it has to be this joint responsibility, and as we built this thing and um, partnered with you all to build these systems of practice where we were not only going to guarantee every kid access and these high expectations, but we were going to monitor that. We were going to monitor school by school. We were going to, if there's anything that I would say is that, when it comes to professional development that contributed to the success that we had over the course of this time is that, PD for teachers is all over the place. And I remember some were going to math conferences in Palm Springs. Some of the administrators had no idea what they're doing. And who knows if it ever got implemented. You got thinking maps over here. You got, we said, no, time out. We need to build a system of practice whereby if you go to Lincoln or Roosevelt, it doesn't matter. You're going to get the same level of a great education, regardless of grade level, because we're going to be consistent about not just investing in that human and social capital, but that our administrators are going to be side by side with them so they can monitor and support it. Our district office are going to be so ingrained in it that we then provide the areas of support that are needed in different schools. And through with 700 plus teachers, we made the commitment to do at least 5 days of PD and put those systems in place and tear apart every prerequisite for kids to get into some classes. Back then, you needed to have a certain grade to get into an AP class. You needed a letter of recommendation from your former teacher, from Obama, for all kinds of people. And then you might be able to get into an AP class. And we scrapped it. And that for IB as well, we want that available to every child.
Paul, that sounded like cuckoo talk, I have to tell you. And I'm way on the progressive end of, shattering inequities and inequitable systems. But when you said thou shalt have no prerequisite to get into an advanced class, honors, AP, IB, if a student wants to challenge themselves to do it, doesn't matter what their academic history is, they shall have the opportunity to do it. That was like the extreme example of everything else, which was we're going to increase expectations operationally, not just in my heart. I expect so much of you, not that, but the level of rigor has been defined and it's up here, and it's up here for all students. There's not going to be an escape, a path of least resistance for anybody. Everybody will be highly educated. So what we call a premium education that some kids get, but for all kids. Um, is it not the case that when you do that, when you increase the level of rigor and expectations for all kids, and you let anybody into those exclusive courses, that you'll have more failure?
Yeah, well, that's not my experience either. But what I think we doubled or tripled our AP participation rates, and test scores went up. Our passage rates went up percentage wise. And we were told, that our percentage passage rate's going to go down. I said, it's 26%. How much further is it going to go down?
Actually, as I recall, your AP classes didn't require students to take the exam.
Well, we changed all that because through LCFF and when that additional money came, we made a commitment not only to paying for the AP class, because a lot of our families couldn't pay for it. There were some good reasons attached to some of these really bad policies. But we also paid for every kid to take the PSAT and the SAT for 5 straight years. And we had college days. We got sick of dragging kids to school on a Saturday because that was nonsensical. Let's just make it a day and do it so everybody knows it's college day. And these are, again, expectations. I think, for the first 2 years, we started on the momentum with building these new system of practices. By virtue of the API scores, we were the most improved district in the state of California for 2 years in a row. That's huge academic growth. And what we did was we raised the expectations, not just for kids, for adults. We started to put in, these courses of study that look different. We challenged people, but we supported them as well. And we had expectations for our principals to monitor this progress and to shift and provide resources and support in those areas where we weren't making the desired gains. And we busted up all of these little clubs, and we grouped our kids heterogeneously across the board. And here's the expectation for all kids, and here's a method that we can use in and outside of class to make sure we're meeting the needs based on where kids were, and Saturday academies where the universities came down and supported our kids. And so, it was really, I think, beautiful to see not only the staff morale start to change, but kids want to come to school. And kids, at that time, for the vast majority, the ceiling was, El Camino Compton College down the street. I mean, this is even 4.2 students, and to write letters and to see acceptance letters to Ivy League schools and Yale and Cornell, and um, watching our A through G rates, which we, again, intentional.
That's university, 4-year university eligibility rates. Tell us where they started and where they are.
I think they were. I may have this wrong. It was about 15%, but it was
Yes,
over
that's
50% when I left, and it's still going up. But I think, and to see, that not just the number of students who um, were now eligible to apply to UC, they they had a better education. They were set up for success no matter what they did. And I know this because this whole argument of world of work and construction trades, I am a huge fan of the construction trades. I've always maintained beautiful relationships and built pathways. I do believe in kids having industry experiences with their school, but they also need to see the connection of the academics and how that plays out in real life. But even the trades would tell you they want kids in those classes because there's higher level thinking and math and stuff that I just know we didn't hurt anyone. And I also know from my personal experience, a lot of my childhood friends who didn't go back to college till they were 23 wish they would have had a different experience that would have prepared them to go in. And I know that we did that. And so, at the end of the day, when we started to get all these awards, and we were the AP College Board district for the country, and what's your secret sauce? And I said, love your children, treat them like your own, and don't accept your current reality. If 100% of your kids aren't leaving the stage with options, then there's a gap. And to look at the system to see it's not these quick fixes. Sean Ginwright I love what he says. We've been putting superficial solutions to deep rooted problems for so long. And if you take Senge's iceberg, all those things that we do that are visible, we think with the best intentions, it's not getting underneath the monster and actually working on changing the mindset and beliefs that are going to really contribute to the success of our kids. And so, wherever I can be a part of that to watch that transformation of making sure our kids are getting what they need and deserve, and not so much of the language of status quo has become normalized, you know and and we have to interrogate it differently. We have to just ask the question: if this were your child, would this be okay? And if the answer is no, then what are you doing about it? We can't keep going on a path that creates haves and have nots. It's not good for our society. No one's going to win. We already know the wealth disparity is increasing for the wealthiest, and the poor are getting poorer. And every behavioral economist, Raj Chetty, all of them have said the solution to that is innovation and education. Well,
And there you have it. A couple of things jump out at me in my research brain as you're talking. I'm listening for what's the recipe? How do you overturn the historical legacy of certain demographic groups of students um, achieving at far lower levels than other groups? And what I'm resonating with is your characterization of not blaming any individuals. I think often it's the teacher's fault, or it's the union's fault, or it's the student's fault, it's the parents' fault. It's, jokingly as an admin, we say it's always the principal's fault, and principals will wink right now, but, superintendent's fault, board. And actually, it's nobody's fault and everybody's responsibility, is what I'm hearing you say.
it is. It's a systems issue, and unless you take a systems solution to it, it's going to perpetuate itself. That's why you have to attack this thing from boardroom to classroom. It can't be these one-offs. That's not going to change the lives of our kids. And I think the other thing that's really important is the one thing I do have an issue with that still exists today is that you know we still, unfortunately, there's so much language about looking at our kids from a deficit perspective, particularly those that haven't been getting the benefits of a great education. And I do have a problem with that, because it's, even with the best of intentions, there is a mindset to look at our kids as something that's wrong with them, instead of the hope and promise and brilliance that they have and can bring to the school. It's a treatment issue. If you ask our black and brown kids, and a lot of them have not been treated fairly, and this is generational. It truly is. And so, aside from all the systems issue, I'm really big on bringing this aspect of the human condition back into schools, the humanity back into schools, and valuing and making sure kids feel like they're connected to the school, and that folks are there for them, um, and that they are capable of anything. It's not about what diagnostic they took on iReady. That is not an indication of what they can do. It's just not. And so, are we looking at every child that comes through that door with the ingenious brilliance, and no matter what it takes to get them there? And are we, because really what it comes down to for me is, um, and again, this is another Jen Wright, although he uses it in a different context. It's, from lens to mirror. If you keep looking out the window and identifying what the problem is there, you're never going to get into introspection and what can I do differently as a leader of school side, a district, or a teacher anyone in the organization to do better by kids and say this current reality is not okay with me. What can I do to change, to reach them, to get them engaged in their studies? And that's what it's about. This is on us. So we control the conditions. At the end of the day, we control the conditions. And so if kids aren't making it, that's not the kid. That's on us.
Well, and I think that's a compelling humanistic perspective. To add credence to that, there's research to suggest that we can't negate the conditions we have no control over. Those exist. Violence, crime, poverty, all of that in the community sometimes that we serve does exist. And with that,
Yeah.
60%,
And
60% or more of student outcomes is attributable directly to the conditions within the school walls. So, and that's plenty to get someone like me, someone like you didn't have, you weren't born with a silver spoon in your mouth, and millions of other people um, through the educational gauntlet to have the kind of life that we all want to have and be able to serve in the way that we serve. So the research would support that. The other thing I think about is Pedro Noguera, who talks about the normalization of failure. And it is ubiquitous. It is so common that you stop even questioning it. I think about you have a spot on your carpet that's been there so long you don't see it anymore. You don't even see it anymore. So how can you challenge it? How can you question it? Much less the conscious thought of, well, it's inevitable that some students will do well and some students won't. I don't even think we really get there as a system because we're just stuck at the normalization of what is. Let me ask you this, Paul.
yeah, but that's one of the things I think in leadership where you can really help people is I used to say that in a different way. Um, how do we come to the space of education with this notion that some kids will and some kids won't? I challenge that from the get go. You have to. If you're going to say all means all, then you can't at the same breath say some kids will and some kids won't. All kids will, and this is what we need to do to get them there. Some kids are going to need different supports because of what's happening in the community. It's up to us to plug those in. But at the end of the day, I think in these situations where we see these gaps, it really takes courage and skill to say, I'm not accepting that as an answer. I've lived through different circumstances that tell me otherwise. There's a family attached to that child. There's a future attached to that child, and we own that part. You cannot allow that language that some kids will and some kids won't. You have to be so galvanized in your purpose and non-negotiable that's not going to be part of our rhetoric. Not here.
Which leads me to the next phase of your life. Leading a school district turned into leading an entire county, over 40 districts, including an adjudicated population and the most vulnerable students, and including on the border, on the US Mexico border. So every possible vulnerability that could challenge academic success in a traditional sense was yours to be had. And so, what I want to ask you is this: what, not to imagine what you're going to say, what would you say to leaders who are wanting to challenge, or to any community members, organization participants, just anybody who cares about every single student experiencing a premium education, which would give them then graduation with every life option available to them? What advice would you give them? Because if it was so easy, everybody would have solved it. And I'm not hearing necessarily a set of steps as much as a disposition from you. That it's less about do this and do this and do this and do this. It's more about the stance you take, the what you express, what you inspire to change the vibrations of an entire culture, that you're influencing. What How do you do that? How do you get people to challenge the status quo, to question the normalization of failure, to even notice gaps in student outcomes, and believe they can do something about it? Uh, how does one do that?
Well, I think first of all, data doesn't lie. Data is a great starting point.
Okay.
And if that can be a starting point outside of the disposition and everything else, tell me if you're okay with this. And I would say there's so many layers that come behind that. But, I've heard superintendents say that, let me see your budget and I'll see what's important to you. But also, let me see your schedules and I'll show you what's important to you. But I think there still exists this huge gap between the literature and practice. That's clearly evident. So I think it's important that we build this coalition of leaders who really understand what it takes to see these things with a critical eye, and then the support to take those steps, because it does take courage. It takes courage to you've got to get boards behind you. You've got to get, your unions coalescing around this common purpose. But, that's why in the business world, this shared vision and moral conviction and putting your resources and everything behind that is so important. Um, and then I think also, I don't use language that creates winners and losers.
Oh, say
I
more about that.
Well, what I mean is that, San Diego is split politically, and this is during the culture wars and COVID. There were a lot of, interesting dynamics. The board was split, the Republican and Democrat, but we developed common language and a common understanding. It took the time to be in dialogue with each other about what was important. Because at the end of the day, I haven't met anyone that really wants to keep these gaps the way they are. But getting folks to coalesce around what you stand for and why is part of the job in leadership. It's the anchor of what we do and why. And then the descriptors of this is how it looks like in practice, because there's a lot of lofty vision statements, a lot of really fun phrases out there. But have you really examined how that translates into your day-to-day work? One of the things that during the toughest contentious times, I used to challenge everyone to think about is this going to build a bridge or start a fire? Because there was so many emotions and heightened everything around. And at the end of the day, we know 99% of the time the right thing to do by kids. We just have to stick to it, but also be able to explain the why behind it. I took a lot of time to be in relationship with a lot of different groups because I didn't want to spend my time defending on what we were doing or being attacked because of what we were doing. And in any of those situations, being in relationship with them, we were able to mitigate a lot of problems just by getting underneath it. Not fighting over terms. And, we had an equity department that was not language that everybody wanted. But when we talked about what it meant and what it was doing and got in really conversation about it, Amanda Ripley's research, there's always people are fighting over something, and then there's really what's underneath that's driving it. We're never really talking about the substance underneath. And I just made it a point um, that people understood not just what we were doing, but why, because the why is so important. And I think if you're really interested in tearing apart these systems, first of all, there's a skill set needed around the research to know that tracking and having different expectations for kids, you are not going to get the results you desire. I've never seen it happen. I shouldn't be sitting here saying that with an affirmative, but I've yet to see a place that has low expectations for kids and they end up closing the gap. I mean, we just don't. So, what does all that stuff look like in practice? That's what we have to iterate on. That's what we have to talk through. It's not just what I believe in, and this is how it looks like in public. This is how it looks like in day to day life. This is what it means now to lead for this. This is what non-negotiables look like, and say these are the things that we're going to stick to no matter what. Here's where we have some flexibility and autonomy to negotiate, where people have autonomy. But in the absence of having that system of practice and approaching this, I think the vast majority, if not all, educators have the best intentions and care about kids. I do. Problem is we're still making the same mistakes we've been. How is it possible in a state that's the fifth largest in the economy, we don't have one centralized method? I'll just use your example that I hear you talk about. How is it as a state we don't have a minimum requirement for the number of sight words for kindergartner?
Right.
It's baffling. It's baffling because if we're really serious about closing the gaps, then why do we consistently allow for different expectations for different kids?
Right.
We can't allow that to continue.
So I hear, Paul, there is a depth of knowledge that's required, the technical side. We have to know, how you set up a master schedule to accelerate learning and not decelerate it for some groups and not others. Not everyone have access to that premium or education. You have to know how to group students, how not to group students. You have to know how to set up the time in your class, how to engage kids. Oh, there is a way to do all of that. What I'm hearing you um, say is that despite that, even if we have the depth of knowledge on the technical side of how to um, create opportunities for high level rigorous education for all students, there are other obstacles. And I want to just lead into this piece of the conversation, because in our work in schools and districts, I have the way I know how to turn around achievement, and we go in and we partner and all that, and then every 2 years the superintendent is changed out and we start all over again. And it's sometimes not the superintendent's wish to leave. Sometimes it is because the conditions are horrid. Sometimes it's political. Sometimes it's their interests. It's so complicated. And so I look to you. How do we ever get there as a country in closing outcome gaps and having all students thrive from every community when you're flipping over superintendent leaders, sometimes board members, like socks?
Well, there is a lot of research and things to be said about continuity of leadership. It is important, but I think from my perspective, this is one of the areas that I'm passionate about, and the reason why I'm embarking on the work that we are now, and that is, not just folks who have that disposition of their love of kids and are willing to put it out there, but not just to train them, but the courage to stand up to some of these things, but also the skills to, you know, our superintendents now have to be facilitators. They have to be working with a lot of diverse groups and bringing them along. And that role that we play, I hope to some degree that we start valuing the position a little more, because it is hard.
Oh,
And you make
where's
best as a family. What?
where is superintendent school that teaches you how to do all of this?
Well, we're creating one. So that's what we did. So Judy White, Francisco Escobedo, and myself. You might know Judy from the Inland Empire. She was superintendent of Reno Valley, and then there's Dr. Judy White, and then Riverside County Office of Ed, and then Dr. Francisco Escobedo, who was Superintendent Chula Vista. Then he was the executive director of NCUS, National Center for Urban School Transformation, with Joe Johnson, and he is also a state board member. The three of us have been creating, essentially PD for sitting and aspiring superintendents. And what we've done essentially is take a look at, all of these outlier districts, including ourselves. We were fortunate to lead large complex systems, and we were outliers during our tenure of getting, some pretty good results. But we also looked at another 10, 15, 20 districts with similar characteristics of the population that we're talking about that have been left behind and who were getting extraordinary results, and studied the conditions. I'm not looking in the state of California and admiring the problem. What we're doing is looking at these really bright spots and these outliers. What were the conditions with the board? What were the conditions with union and educator partnerships and instructional design? I mean, we looked at everything you could think of. And lo and behold, there's all these themes that emerge that we're actually building competencies that will have, anchored in depth of knowledge, but we'll have, the skill set, but also we talk about the will and the heart. And so we connect all of the areas of the tripod of what it means to be a transcendent superintendent. And as we build that out, we feel pretty confident that it's a very unique approach in what we're doing and the experiences we have, and partnering with you and Pedro Noguera and Tyrone Howard, who are going to be some of the authors that design and help with some of the workshops, but really taking a look at these 9 competencies, not just training people up and getting them equipped for anything from day one on the job, but uber preparing them, their skill set and knowledge of what it takes to lead successfully for students, not themselves, but for kids, and what it means to shape systems of practices and how to interrogate those. And so our delivery model, we hope to pilot, I think, sometime July-ish through September. But we've, I think, brought together a pretty good team of folks to not just, again, the competencies that we've developed based on what we've discovered in the field, um, that will transcend not just now but into tomorrow, and but also the researchers and authors, and then we can build the bridge from that. And this is what it looks like in practice. So, um, you know, we're also going to be doing a lot of work and have done some already with school boards and the relationship between the school board and the superintendent, and really paying attention to the needs there. And not just so people can extend their tenure, but to make them just the most effective leadership group can really lead for kids. I mean, it's all student centered, and when you do that, you kind of eliminates a lot of the stuff on the fray, um, because it's hard to then lead for your own special interests when you keep putting the kids in the center of the table.
I, I can't wait. I just, I for one, in our work, trying to change the odds for kids, can't wait to have this ability to, this way to teach executive leaders in all the areas that impact um, the technical side how to have a disposition, a stance, what you stand on, how you develop followership, how you inspire followership.
How
Because
you develop people, how you develop self, how you continuously grow as a learner and leader.
and
And
there
those are
is a methodology to that, as you described it. It's not just saying, I believe in all kids and, high expectations for all those platitudes have gotten us as far as we've gone now, but no higher. So I cannot wait to hear that. I'm going to just summarize some of the key points that are leaping out at me from my research head, and then I'm going to ask you to end with one story. So you can be thinking about that. But and the story is um, an example of when you've been really tested as a leader trying to lead for students, and where you landed, how you led to the right place. And I want to end on that because I think that's going to uh, sting, and it's going to warm us up, and it's going to leave us with the need for some quiet. So right before that, I'll say that the themes that are jumping out at me are how important it is to think about everything as a system, not as individuals, because you can identify hotspots and traps in a system and change them. It's much harder to do that in a person, and it's arrogant to think you can. And that beneath that iceberg of a school system, what drives everything are beliefs and expectations about students and their inherent capacity to do well or not well, and how ubiquitous it is to just accept the normalization of failure. And without interrogating that, as you say, it just perpetuates. Um, the other theme that jumps out at me is the critical importance of having senior leaders, especially in this case, in our discussion, develop the capability to navigate a system that is more complex than we have time to discuss. The layers and layers and layers and layers of gunk that are in the way of just doing the right thing, uh, while trying to preserve a career, trying to take care of your own family, your own health. We don't have time to discuss right now, but seeing it in the first person, we think about CEOs of huge corporations and how much they have on their shoulders and how hard it is. But when we think about a school district superintendent, we don't think that way. And oh my goodness, the things that they face and the things that you have to figure out a way to solve is 24/7 pressure and opportunity. So that's another huge area that we need to crowdsource solutions for. And thank you for the next iteration of your career, devoting your time to that. So, Paul, there was a time, pick one of many, when someone came to you and asked you to do something that they were absolutely identifying with and pressuring you as a leader for, that you knew or you believed was the wrong thing, and it could have jeopardized your job. You have a family. I mean, in the end, we're humans. Um, what was that, and how did it go?
There's a lot of them. I'm trying to think of one that doesn't out people.
Oh, true, true, true. Don't want to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I've killed a lot of resolutions because I felt that it would cause more division and bang up one political side. I've been asked to stop common assessments because some teachers didn't like it when the vast majority saw the benefit. I've been asked to do a lot of fire people that didn't deserve to be fired, and I didn't succumb to any of these. And though the one that just the one that comes to mind most recently is probably isn't relevant to the discussion, but it's just an indication of you know doing the right thing because it's the right thing. It's when it became a very political issue when the unaccompanied minors came to San Diego in the convention center, and they asked us to start a school, and we did within a week.
When who did? I'm sorry, I couldn't make that out.
Homeland Security
Homeland Security. I see.
asked us to. I mean, the law. Any kid who shows up, you teach them. But there was 1,500. And they asked us to start a school within a week, and we did, and it became very political. Um, and so it garnered a lot of attention nationally, and getting death threats, and having wife and kids answer the door, had to drive alternative routes home. And the one thing that I can tell you is that for the kids, going to school was the best part of their day, because we had so many loving, caring adults. You could see the progress of their learning. This wasn't about politics. This was about, I have no opinion on whatever they want to do with any of that. When a kid shows up in my boundaries and needs to be taught, I'm going to teach them. That's just it. And not just to see the light of it. We called it futuro brillante, and the kids lit up. They loved school. They talked how much it meant to them. And you saw these kids that have been through quite a bit, separation of families, every story you could hear under the sun, had a place to go where people cared about them, and they saw some, they were learning English. They were still continuing their studies. Well, that turned into death threats for myself and family. That turned into a lot of different things, not just me, but other members of the staff. And Homeland Security, I'll never forget, came to me and said, we can pull the plug on the school because I know what your family's going through and what you're going through. And without hesitation, I just said, absolutely not. This is what we do. I mean, this is what we do. This is what we're bred to do. We provide inspiration and hope to any kid who shows up at the door, particularly those most in need. That's why I've always been so attached to the court schools, because the kids come in broken and they leave with a plan and some hope. And that's magical. That is the power of public education. And to see the kids in that setting thrive, and knowing that in any instant I could have killed the program just because of external circumstances, I wasn't going to do it. So my determination to do what's right for kids, no matter what, shows up in a lot of different ways. But that's what I'm thinking of right now.
Well, Paul, I would be remiss if I didn't mention to the audience and our research participants here, this is what it feels like to be around Dr. Paul Gothold. As bad as things might be, you leave with hope and inspiration and emotion and a determination to not accept the status quo, and to accept the responsibility instead to do something to be of help, so that every student receives a premium education, so they have every life option available to them after graduation, no matter where they live, where they go to school, or what their circumstance. Paul, with all my love and respect, thank you very much for your time and for everything that you do every single day and always have.
Right back at you.
Bye, everybody.
Shattering Inequities requires more than conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future of education together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for all students. Thanks for listening.